Recording in progress. Mate, thank you, Matt James Connolly, for being on the chat. Mate, for the purposes of this chat, I'm just going to refer to you for those watching as Connolly, because that's what I know you as. When someone calls you Matt, I'm sort of like, who is Matt? So Connolly, yeah, cheers for taking the time to be on the chat, mate. How are we?
Yeah, well, mate, thank you for having me.
My pleasure, bro. My pleasure. So as I said, when I sort of put together this chat, this segment of the Mindful Men Project, it was all about just chatting with people in regards to any sort of struggles that they've experienced. I know personally for me, when I've gone through challenges around anxiety, predominantly anxiety and sometimes depression, I've found that what's really helped me is just sort of other people's vulnerability, honesty, and bravery, and hearing their stories and what's helped them. So that's what the chat is about, just chatting to everyday blokes and legends like yourself that have undergone some sort of challenge, whether that's monumental, whether that's medium, whether that's tiny, and again, that's sort of up to the individual's perception anyway. But so thanks for coming on. Basically, we'll pass over to you. You're a PT, a coach, you're a mate, you're a dad, you're a mentor, you're a lot of things. And I've worked with you for probably been close to 12 years now, I think. It's been a while.
Yeah, yeah, it's coming up to about 12 years, I think, 2011 maybe.
Yeah. So we've been through a lot together. We've seen each other have kids. We've had challenges, and we've sort of turned to each other, and we've sort of spoken about the men's mental well-being and so forth. So yeah, we've sort of seen each other at some highs and lows. So yeah, we'll pass over to you and just, mate, yeah, thank you for being vulnerable, honest, and brave, and just sharing some sort of struggle you've had, and if that story and your tips or what got you through and what helped you in that challenging time can help others. That's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me again. And just going back to what you said before, I guess, whether it be big, medium, or small, and you sort of touch base on how that's just perception anyway. Like,
Totally.
it doesn't matter what you think, I guess, what other people would think of that circumstance. If you're perceiving that circumstance or whatever's happened to be big, that's big for you, yeah. So I think
Totally.
that's really important. It doesn't matter what you
100%.
think about, what society thinks or whatever. If that's a tough time, or that's 100% a tough, however you perceive that circumstance. So I think
Agreed.
that's really important. Look,
Yeah.
going back to I guess my history, I've sort of gone through a couple of different stages in terms of my mental health. The first time I was probably aware of it would have been maybe early 20s, late teens. I can't remember quite exactly the time frame. But looking back, I was, crying every day. I wasn't motivated. I turned I was really unhappy in my job. I was unhappy in my relationship. And look, I want to sort of point out there's nothing wrong with that person that I was in a relationship with, or there was nothing wrong with that particular job. It's just that, wasn't fulfilling, my values and my cup. Um,
Yeah.
so, them two put together, and then looking back, I sort of see a lot of insecurities back then when I was a lot younger. I was drinking Friday, Saturday, uni nights, Wednesdays,
Yeah.
living quite an unhealthy lifestyle, which eventually just sort of had that snowball effect where it started off pretty small, but eventually I did get quite depressed, and I was finding myself crying every day, not really knowing why. And I remember quite clear actually driving my car down the freeway, and I was suicidal. I probably wasn't, but I do remember thinking that if I just drove this car that next big tree, like, I don't think anyone would even care. Like, no one would ever miss me. And I remember just sort of crying in my little white Corolla as I sort of drove along. And I think my partner at the time said, "Oh man, I think you got some depression. Maybe we should go see a doctor." So going to see a GP in that circumstance, or that part of my life, was probably the first step to overcoming that depression then and there. So, cut a long story short, saw a GP, referred me to a psychologist. The GP put me antidepressants and on the road. And I probably wasn't on the antidepressants for a long time. I saw the GP every week, every week, and he was great. He was ex-military. He was hard but fair and stern. And I remember going to see him once. I was drinking and I had a massive hangover. I wanted a doctor's certificate because I called in sick for work. And obviously, you shouldn't drink and mix antidepressants up. And he said, "Mate, you're a dickhead. I'll sign it this time, but never again. You need to pull your head in." So he's probably, a GP just to call you a dickhead. He was probably just the right amount of firmness, but empathetic and fair. He's probably exactly what I needed at the time. And I did go to see a psychologist at the time, but I only went for one session and I didn't continue. I didn't really resonate with the process. It wasn't really for me. And then when the GP, I remember it's like, "Oh, why haven't you booked in again?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't really like him." And the GP's like, "Oh, I don't like him either, mate. That's fair enough."
Yeah. Okay.
So that process of seeing a psychologist didn't really help. Well, I didn't. To be fair, I didn't give it a good chance, but I didn't really resonate with it.
Sure.
At the time, I think I was training at a local Anytime Fitness, and I ended up hiring a PT. And this is sort of, I guess, my first gateway in terms of my career now as a personal trainer. A little cliche, but I remember just feeling how good it was, after getting absolutely smashed for 30, 40 minutes, 2 or 3 times a week with a PT. And wow, man, like this feels amazing. And then I do remember maybe 4 months into the piece where when I was on antidepressants, I sort of took myself off them, saw my GP, said, "Oh, mate, I don't really need them anymore." And then I went to study my Cert 3 and 4 in PT. Eventually, I was to break up with my partner back then. And then things sort of started to unfold as you know me, I guess, now.
Yeah. Yeah, nice. So the exercise. So, and I guess just on that as well, that seeing a psychologist didn't resonate with you at that time. And, that's not to say, obviously, that's not a strategy and something that people should look to at certain times of struggling. And obviously, the one thing or the main thing that sounds like it was really helpful was the fitness space, like the exercise, the movement, those natural feel good endorphins that we experience like daily by exercising. And we see that in our clients, right? Like there's something about it that is pretty special. I know during COVID, when a lot of clients couldn't train, they would be like, "When can we train? I need to train. I need to train." And a lot of people thought that it was just a weight loss or a fitness thing, but they're like, "No, I need this for my mental well-being." I found that quite amazing. We know the benefits physically and mentally, but I found during COVID when clients were unable to train, the main thing that they were missing was how it positively impacted upon their mental well-being, probably more than their physical well-being.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
100%. And I guess, this comes down to, there was another time in life, and it wasn't that long ago, to be honest, maybe a couple of years ago. And I've probably shared this story with you a few times now, where just after my wedding, I injured my back. So I slipped a disc. I found it hard to sort of train, to put on a little bit of weight. And then from there, I sort of like found myself talking, "I'm too busy at work. I can't train." And I was just like, I kept on putting it off and I kept on I ended up putting like about 15, 16 kilos, which is a fair bit. Like that was quite a lot for myself. And then fast forward maybe 1 or 2 years, I think my grandfather passed away, and that was probably the iceberg that would probably tip me over. And where I said, I didn't really quite feel myself. And I remember talking to my wife, Mel, things aren't quite right at the moment. And then I sort of went down that same process where I did go to the GP and I had a chat to the GP and did get a referral to a psychologist. And I remember that's interesting. They, if anyone's going through the process, they ask you a bunch of questions and they give you a score. And I remember my score being quite high. And then she said, "Well, it is quite high. It looks like you do have depression. Do you have any suicidal thoughts?" And what I said after that, it quite surprised her. She's like, I actually replied, "No, not at all. There's no way I want to die." And it's just interesting how we sort of associate severe depression or depression in general to suicide. And interesting that she asked me that question, and then she was surprised when I said, "No way, like I don't want to die. I'm just not quite feeling myself at the moment." I found that quite interesting. But
Yeah.
similar, I guess, story to the first story, or still similar circumstance to the first story. By the time I did see the psychologist, I'm obviously a little bit wiser now. I've been in it time. I've done a lot of study around, similar to yourself, around mental health and psychology and stuff. So before I did see the psychologist, I sort of told myself, if this was a client, what would you get them doing? So, in fact, I actually stopped training in the gym completely, and I just went walking every day. I found that that pressure of going to the gym, that pressure of having to weights or whatever I thought I had to do, was then causing more stress, which was making things worse. So I stopped going to the gym. I started walking, getting out in nature, really worked on my sleeping habits, and then building a good foundation from there.
Yeah.
Then from there, I was able to, I guess, uh, clean up my diet a little bit. And by the time I did go to the psychologist, I said, mate, I'm feeling pretty good. Actually, I don't really need you. So, I was fortunate enough in that circumstance to know to sort of climb my way out of it. But yeah, that's probably the second time I've sort of gone through, I guess, a similar, like different circumstances, but similar sort of thing.
Yeah. So just some life events that happen to all of us, right? Like deaths or, putting on weight or whatever that happens to be, injury, like these things are sort of, little speed humps in our lives that, or roadblocks or whatever we want to call them. Again, as we spoke about at the start, it's all just perception based on the severity and how intense these things are. But I think, what I draw from that is the fact that these things are inevitable. Like these challenges, these struggles, whether it be a death, whether it be a breakup, whether it be a job loss, whether it be an injury, whether it be, whatever that happens to be, like these things are the curveballs that life throws at us. And having some strategies like, people to talk to, having a GP, having a psychologist, having a partner to lean on, having, nature and movement and nutrition and things like that you mentioned. Like, I think I've found personally and with clients that it's not necessarily one thing. It's just a combination of, a few almost like tiny little things, gratitude or journaling or breath work or exercise or getting out and walking, or as you said, even just taking the pressure off yourself sometimes and alleviating that sort of that mindset that I have to go to the gym, I have to lift weight, or I have to run 20K or whatever it happens to be. Just sometimes, being kind to yourself and just taking the foot off the gas sometimes can be enough to just have a bit of breathing space to sort of know what the next step is.
Yeah, absolutely. And just in terms of that, how often have we told ourselves or, have we heard clients say, I have to go to the gym, I have to do whatever. And then they don't do that thing they said they had to do.
Yeah.
How do they feel then?
Yeah. Yeah.
They start to feel guilty, or whatever other feelings associated. So at a subconscious level, I would almost say they start to feel guilty or, whatever negative feeling they might feel at a subconscious level towards that association. So,
yes,
if they say they have to go to the gym, they don't go to the gym, then they think, oh, gee, the gym's making me feel this way at a subconscious level.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's like kids, right? Like it's that you have to eat your veggies, you have to go to bed. Like when there's a have to, we learn from a young age that we want what we don't have, or we don't like being told what to do. And it's no different to adults, right? Like you're told, look, you can't have pizza straight away. You're like, well, fuck, I want a meat lover's like thick base right now. I want a whole pizza, right? Like when we're set. So it's just that wording and that focusing on, the positives and the things that we do want, and then filling our cup with what we do want and what we feel is going to serve us. And then the other stuff will sort of just wash away. Is there anything else? Any other tips? Any other quick tips, even irrespective of those two situations? I mean, I could chat and pick your brain for hours, which I do, daily at work. But is there any other tips you would give men that are going through a challenging time? Again, that might be a job loss. It might be financial struggles. It might be, coming into Christmas, they feel alone, or, whatever it happens to be. Any little tips or big tips that you've learned along the way, or that you would like to sort of throw out there?
Yeah, definitely. You touched base on this about 30 seconds ago. Sort of focus on what you want as opposed to what you don't want. And then the most overrated things for me is work on the foundations of health. So, when we build a house, we lay the concrete or whatever it is first. So for me, the foundation for health is, focus on getting good sleep, getting outside, increasing your vitamin D intake, moving, even if it's just a slow walk. Just those three things alone, sleep, vitamin D, and slow movement, for me, is the most underrated thing because they're free,
Yes.
they're easy to implement, and anyone can do them to a certain degree.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the effects they have on our mental and physical health are profound.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Awesome tips. I love that. Just the simplicity. And I think you're so right in the fact that they're not rocket science. It's just, if you can do them consistently, I don't think people value the positive impact that those three things can have, right? Like, it's not, oh, you've got to get this amount of protein and this, and you've got to do a HIIT session 4 times. But like, get outside, get sleep, vitamin D, walk, like all of those basic things that you almost like laugh at when you hear them. Because sometimes I tell clients or advise clients of some strategies that might assist them, and they almost go, what else? And I'm like, no, just that. No, what else? Like, there's got to be more. And I'm like, no, just do those. And they almost like,
yeah,
like, that's so basic. And I'm like, that's the idea. Like, if you can consistently do them for like a month, then let's revisit. But as you said, like those three things, monumentally valuable when applied consistently.
and of course, don't be afraid to reach out for help, whether it be your partner or a mate, or maybe see a specialist or a professional like a GP or a PT or a coach, whoever that might be for you. Don't be afraid to sort of reach out if you do need any help.
Yeah, awesome final words, mate. Appreciate it. Connolly, thank you so much for being on the chat, being vulnerable, honest, and brave, my friend. I'll chat to you very soon, man. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for taking the time, bro.
See you, mate.
Cheers, man.